What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the May 6th edition, the first edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer, and I'm back. I'm doing live shows again. Appreciate you all checking it out. I'm going to just, on these shows, be going game by game through the MLB slate for DraftKings and FanDuel. Feel free to jump in chat, ask DFS strategy questions, happy to talk about that stuff as well. Don't have a co-host, obviously, so things might be a little shaky, at least at the beginning. I'm not used to doing all of the back end stuff, but I'll figure it out eventually. The plus to not having a co-host, though, like I was saying, if you have questions, obviously I have a lot more time to talk about stuff and happy to do so. So jump in chat with any questions you have throughout the show. Also, I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I have been offering some MLB content behind the paywall at Dub Club. You can find the link to that in the pinned tweet on my Twitter. 20% off your first month. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I'm just going to walk through game by game. I built out some lineups already, so I have an idea of kind of where I think players should be owned based on my projections, and we can compare that to the field. We can see how things look. If you are looking for a specific game, I don't have a banner on the screen, obviously, but you can use this banner up here at the top. This is the SaberSim tool. I'm not pushing it or anything. I don't have any referral codes, but I do think it's a really good product. I use it, and I'm going to just use the banner here at the top for which game I'm on. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can just see what's highlighted. So kicking it off with Milwaukee at KC, looks like we have about a 10-run total here. Cole Reagans going for the Royals. Bryce Wilson on the mound for Milwaukee. A lot of strikeouts for Cole Reagans. Really, really, really good pitcher. Came out of nowhere last year. He had been in the Texas organization, was traded over to Kansas City, massive bump in strikeout stuff. So he's a weird pitcher from a DFS standpoint, from a projection standpoint, because I still don't think industry projections have really caught up to how good this guy is. And I never really know how to handle that, because you want to assume when somebody does emerge out of nowhere like Reagans that they probably aren't as good as they have been, but they're probably better than they used to be. His stuff is really, really good, so that does back up the increase in strikeout percentage as well. He's maintained the high strikeout percentage so far this year, striking out 28.9% of guys he's faced, 3.16 xFIP. Really, really good pitcher, $8,800 price tag. Projects reasonably well here. It is a scary matchup against Milwaukee, but right now he showed up in about 31% of the lineups that I built. He's currently projected for about 39% ownership. So field is getting to him a lot. I would expect to be getting to him a lot. Again, it's only a 6-game slate, so you do have limited pitching upside as well. Definitely don't really have an issue getting to him. Bryce Wilson on the other side, not somebody that you're likely to want to be getting a lot of. Just not a very good strikeout pitcher, not a good strikeout spot. This park is actually bad for strikeouts as well, which is something that's really interesting to me. This is something that I've been noting a lot lately in my content behind the paywall. Kansas City has this track record of being a bad offensive park when people talk about it, but it's really not. It's a bad home run park. It's good for like everything else offensively. If you look at park factors for Kauffman Stadium, it's towards the top of the league over the last 3 years in runs, in singles, doubles, triples, basically everything except for home runs. It's also near the bottom or at the bottom in strikeout percentage. And, people ask sometimes like how different parks have different park factors for strikeouts. But one thing is that every stadium has a different batter's eye in center field. So hitters are seeing the ball differently in each stadium. And if you can pick the ball up really well out of a pitcher's hand, you're going to strike out less. Also, big, foul territory. For example, Oakland will drive down strikeout percentage. So this really isn't a good park for strikeouts. It's not a great park for pitching in general as far as run prevention goes. And then you add in that Bryce Wilson just isn't a good strikeout pitcher, and Kansas City doesn't strike out a ton as a team. It's a 6-game slate, so if you're getting to some $6,300 Wilson in your larger field tournaments just because he's cheap and low owned, then fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's nothing about this guy that should be driving you to actually get to him. From a stacking standpoint, I think Kansas City, I expected Kansas City to look pretty good. They're actually not showing up as much as far as 5-mans go as I would have expected. Maybe that changes throughout the day. Maybe it doesn't. But I'm always happy to get to KC. I think anybody that has watched any of my shows at any point over the last few years knows that I'm always happy to get to Kansas City. I like that Bobby Witt Jr. is a shortstop. That always drives them up for me, or typically drives them up for me, just because it's a tough position to get upside at, and Bobby Witt Jr. gives you all of that. Same thing goes for Salvador Perez when he's in the lineup, gives you a good catching option. And then you just have cheap bats on KC. Michael Massey at second base, only 3,300 on DraftKings. MJ Melendez at 3,800. So I like KC. I would say even a little bit more than is showing up right now for me as far as stacks go. On the other side for Milwaukee, if you're going there, I think it is basically just the talent. Willy Adames, Rhys Hoskins, obviously good, but really brutal matchup with Regans. Also seen a couple people mention in chat that there are weather concerns in this game. Obviously something to keep an eye on. I generally don't look at that in the morning just because weather changes so much and I don't have to make any decisions at this point, but definitely something to keep an eye on. If it looks like maybe the weather issues are mid-game, in which case then you're basically looking for, is it this game's going to go into a delay and then be done, in which case you probably don't want any of it. If it's, moving showers, somebody said they moved the game time up to 7:10, in which case I don't know if it's even on the slate anymore. So I guess a lot of moving parts with this one, but if this game does go and if it is actually on the slate, then Cole Regans looks really good. I like KC quite a bit. They're showing up middle of the pack for me, but I personally think that they look a little bit better than that. Next, we can go to Seattle at Minnesota. Plenty of strikeouts to be had in this game, so I would expect pitching to be looking pretty good. We have Luis Castillo going for Seattle. We have Woods Richardson going for Minnesota. Castillo, obviously a great strikeout pitcher. Woods Richardson is not, but he has gotten to face the White Sox a couple of times in his starts this year, so that'll make his numbers look a little bit better. Seattle strikes out a ton. They have the highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching third highest now in baseball this season. No, they're at the top. Wrong page. 29.3% K percentage against righties, 99 WRC plus. They do have a lot of power in this lineup. And again, Woods Richardson, not a great strikeout pitcher. I don't think he looks great here at 7K. It is a 6-game slate, maybe a 5-game slate. So, again, if you need a value pitcher, fine. You can chase the strikeouts for Seattle. You can see here he's projected for about 7% ownership, and he showed up in about 14% of the lineups I built. So I would say that he looks like a decent, cheap contrarian play, not somebody that I am confident in at all, because again, I don't think he's very good, but you do get strikeouts here. The pitcher that I would be confident in, obviously, is Castillo. $9,600 price tag. I have him projected for about 19 DraftKings points, showing up in about 33% of the lineups I built, fields at about 44%. So you can argue that he's over-owned in terms of his chances of being in the winning lineup or the optimal lineup compared to where the field is, but I don't really care that much. Clearly, he projects as one of the most likely pitchers to succeed for me as well. He is prone to giving up power, which obviously is concerning, and there is some power in the Minnesota lineup, but still a really good strikeout pitcher. 28.7% K percentage this year, 3.02 xFIP. I have no issues whatsoever in wanting to get to him. Minnesota so far this season, 22.8% K percentage against right-handed pitching, is in the middle of the pack, 103 WRC plus. So, again, not a cakewalk matchup or anything for Castillo, but it's not a bad spot either. Offensively, Seattle is interesting to me because I don't think Woods Richardson is that good, and because they do have so much power. They're showing up third most right now as far as overall stacks go in the lineups that I built. If you look at 5-mans, they're showing up third there as well. And that's not really surprising to me. You've also had favorable pricing on them recently, which is really nice. You still have it. Julio Rodriguez, 5K. Corey Polanco, 3,900. Luke Raley, obviously not a great hitter, but he's 3K, probably hitting toward the bottom of the order. Rojas has been hitting at the top of the order. He's 3,400. Cal Raleigh gives you a ton of power at catcher at 4K. It's a really, really easy team to stack. They have talent. They're cheap. And I mentioned it when I was talking about Woods Richardson before. Yeah, they strike out a lot. And so far this year, they only have a 99 WRC plus, but I do expect that production to come up. I expect the strikeouts to stay. Maybe they come down a little bit in terms of percentage, but I do expect the Mariners to be one of the most strikeout heavy teams in baseball this year. But also I expect them to hit well. They have too much power, too much talent in this lineup for them not to. And they're getting a pitcher in Woods Richardson who isn't proven at the major league level and really isn't proven at the minor league level. So I do like getting to Seattle here for multiple reasons. Just the chances of them succeeding are high. The lineups you can build around them are really high. You have, not only a lot of power here, but because of their pricing, you can put good pitching around them. You can put good secondary stacks, good one-offs around them, and just get really, really high upside lineups around this team. So I do expect that they'll be pretty popular. You see that over here in the ownership column. But aside from ownership, I think Seattle looks great. Minnesota on the other side, clearly not a good spot against Luis Castillo. The case that I would make for Minnesota is that Castillo can struggle with power at times. And you're not going into this saying, I think that Castillo's definitely going to struggle here, and I really like the Twins. That's not it at all. The case would be that this is a 5 or 6 game slate, and if between a third and half the field is going to have Castillo, and he has a bad start, you just have a clear path to the top of tournaments, knocking off a huge portion of the field already. So that would be the case for getting to Minnesota, is just the game theory angle. It's not that they're going to succeed very often. It's that when they do, you can get paid really, really well. And baseball obviously just has a lot of inherent randomness. Anybody who sits here and says, oh, this is what's going to happen, Castillo's going to have a good game, Castillo's going to have a bad game, they're lying to you, because it's baseball and just random stuff happens. So there is the case to be made, especially in larger field stuff, for putting yourself in a position to just capitalize when random things happen. But outside of that, I don't think there's a case for Minnesota being like a really likely team or anything. Saw somebody in chat ask if I played the Underdog Daily contest. I don't. I should. I have a lot more time now than I did in the past, which was the reason I didn't play. It's something that I've been thinking about that I should get into. I just haven't gotten around to building anything that I would want to use for it. But I would guess maybe by the end of the year I get into it. I do think they're fun. I was playing it for basketball for a little bit and then kind of got sidetracked and stopped. But yeah, it's something I probably should make part of my process that I don't. Good luck if you are playing over there. Maybe you'll see me in those soon. Next, we have San Diego taking on the Cubs in Chicago. Looks like a pretty low total in this game, so I am going to go ahead and assume that the wind is not blowing out. Neil says I should not play on Underdog, so that's just going to make me want to play there sooner, probably. That's the wrong button. We have Yu Darvish taking on Justin Steele. Steele returning from the injured list for the Cubs. Tough spot, really, for both guys, but primarily for Steele, who you don't know how deep into the game he's going to go. He's 9K. The matchup with San Diego is not great. He showed up in about 6% of the lineups that I built. Field's at about 12% right now, so I actually have him going a little bit under-owned. Hope he pitches well. Seems like a cool guy. I know he's active in the fantasy sports community in general, but I don't anticipate really rostering him today. Yu Darvish, on the other hand, pulling about 20% ownership on DraftKings. About 24% of the lineups that I built have Darvish, so I think that ownership is pretty much correct. $8,400 price tag. His strikeout percentage to start the year is down a bit. Only a 21% K percentage, 4.07 xFIP. He did have a stint on the injured list, missed about 15 days with if I remember correctly, a stiff neck. That could just be me making something up. I think that's what it was. Either way, he came back. Don't expect him to really be limited or anything. The Cubs do have some good hitters in their lineup, but Cody Bellinger is out, which weakens the lineup a bit. Overall this season, their active roster with a 23% K percentage, 99 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. So think that Darvish just looks pretty good at this price tag. You don't have a ton of confidence because he hasn't been great so far this year and the Cubs aren't bad. But in the context of the slate, he looks pretty good. I don't anticipate getting to a ton of bats here. San Diego showing up more than the Cubs are for me, which I think makes sense. Again, Steele's a good pitcher. I am not actively looking to target against him, but you never know how these guys are going to look when they come back from the injured list. You don't know how rust is going to present itself and any of that. And then San Diego also is just a good offensive team. It's a short slate. So, I think that Fernando Tatis probably pulling up that stack percentage for San Diego a bit. Only 5,100 for him is a pretty insane price tag given everything that he offers you, regardless of the matchup. Campusano is a $3,500 catcher, is just a pretty good value. Machado, we know, is playing through the elbow injury, so he's not playing the field, but at 4,800, still don't mind getting to him offensively. Nico Horner probably leading off for the Cubs at 4,400 looks like a pretty good price tag. He looks like the Chicago bat that stands out the most. But overall, I don't really think that this is a game where I'm going to be getting to too much in the way of hitting. Fernando Tatis probably aside, and Yu Darvish looks like the primary option at pitcher. Now, before I move into the Mets and Cardinals game, a little bit more about that Dub Club package I mentioned earlier, and that is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. I have been doing a little bit of my own MLB stuff over there, sports betting stuff as well. If you check my Twitter, I can't put the links on YouTube yet, probably will by tomorrow or the end of the week. But if you check my Twitter, use those links. You can sign up for either my MLB DFS package or MLB DFS plus sports betting. The MLB package comes with written game-by-game notes from me every day during the week, access to my Discord where I do actually hang out and talk strategy, talk whatever people want. I put out my projections, top stacks, top hitters, top pitchers, about a half hour or so before lock, as after most lineups have come out. So yeah, it's just, access to me. It's $25 a month for the DFS package, $40 a month for DFS plus betting. The betting package also includes my recommended bets as I make them throughout the day, and access to my strikeout simulation model, prop betting for strikeouts. I have what I think is a pretty good model for that. So access to the results there. But again, it's nothing crazy. It's not going to make you the best DFS player in the world. I do think it'll make you better at a price point that isn't going to make it impossible for you to profit at DFS from paying it. So check out the links in my Twitter account if you're interested in that. But anyway, back to today's games. Mets taking on the Cardinals. Again, another game with like a 9.5 total, it looks like. So not a super exciting offensive game, but we don't really have any of those on this slate. You have Kyle Gibson taking on Sean Manaea here. Gibson for the Cards, Manaea obviously for the Mets. So yeah, Neil, my layout is better than yours on day one. Sorry about it. Gibson, obviously not a great strikeout pitcher. Manaea does have pretty good strikeout stuff, but not a great spot. But they are both reasonably priced. About 12% ownership for both pitchers, about 12% exposure to both pitchers for me in the lineups that I built. Their ownership numbers are both a little bit lower, and I get why. Neither guy's a good strikeout pitcher, neither guy is a great pitcher overall. Manaea does have a 23.5% K percentage this year, but he's also walked 14% of hitters with a 4.77 xFIP. You're not going to feel good about that. And then Kyle Gibson, only a 19% K percentage, 4.28 xFIP. So I understand why neither guy's getting much ownership, but I do think they're going a little bit under-owned in terms of just they're serviceable pitchers and it's a short slate and they're not getting much ownership. So there are ways you can differentiate in tournaments. Neither one looks like any sort of priority to me, though. The Mets, as far as all stacks go, showing up fourth most. Cardinals showing up middle of the pack as well. You can see over here that outside of basically Texas and the Dodgers, and to some extent the Mariners, like these teams are all just sort of lumped together. 5-man stacks, the Mets are actually showing up the second most behind Texas. So I get it. Like Gibson lets you put the ball in play. The park is not great for home runs, but the Mets do have some solid power in their lineup. They're also generally not that expensive. Jeff McNeil, 3,200, showing up as the most popular Met for me, just a value play. Lindor at 5K looks fine. Nimmo looks pretty good at 4,500. There's certainly nothing wrong with a $5,300 price tag on Pete Alonso. So I like that. The park isn't great, but in the context of this slate, I think getting some of these reasonably priced bats against Gibson makes a lot of sense. On the other side for the Cards, generally it's not an easy sell to say like, oh yeah, I want to stack against this pitcher that when he's not pitching well, just walks a lot of guys, which is the case for Manaea. But on a shorter slate, I think you should just generally be less concerned about the really minute details like that. And then also, the flip side to that argument is your hitters are getting more at bats. If Manaea is walking guys, you're getting through the lineup in extra time. They're getting additional plate appearances. And also, if Manaea is working behind the counts, he can make mistakes and give up power. Generally he doesn't. He just walks you. But there is, that side to the argument as well. Dylan Carlson, 2,400. If he's in the lineup, looks like a pretty good value. Goldschmidt, Arenado, Contreras. Obviously, you're always happy getting to those guys. Contreras as a catcher is sort of in that Salvador Perez, like Bobby Witt range, where I always seem to want to get to him just because of the upside he offers at a pretty weak position. But he's also getting really, really expensive. 5,600 on DraftKings now. I think in a lot of builds, you're probably better off just paying down at catcher. But if you can find the salary for him, I see no issue with getting to him against Manaea either. Texas taking on Oakland in Oakland. So Park downgrade for the Rangers, but they do get to face the A's. Alex Wood going for Oakland. Andrew Heaney on the mound for Texas. Two cheap pitching options here. Obviously, a much better matchup for Heaney than for Alex Wood. Wood is 5,500. He's projected for about 8% ownership. He showed up in like 16% of the lineups I built. Now, I will say one thing that tends to happen for me in these early builds when I'm looking at the slate in the morning too, is that value pieces just get pushed up a little bit. Alex Wood, because he's so cheap, showing up probably a little bit more for me now than he would later on in the day. I think we're going to see like Travis Jankowski on the offensive side of this game, same type of thing. And the reason is just that we're using projected lineups. And usually once our lineups are released, you get some unexpected guys starting, or you get guys in lineup spots that you weren't projecting for, and you get value opening up that way. Whereas when I run lineups in the morning, it's like, oh, well, I really want to get to the Dodgers, so let's use Alex Wood. There's not really any other value out there. That does typically change. So I would kind of view spots like that with a grain of salt, but it is the same sort of thing that we were talking about with Gibson and Manaea. Wood's not a great pitcher by any stretch. The matchup with Texas certainly isn't any good, but it's a short slate, and you're going to have people going to Texas bats as well. So you do get some negative correlation where if Alex Wood just gives you a good 4 or 5 innings, picks you up 13, 14 DraftKings points, Texas probably also didn't do well, at least for those 4 or 5 innings. Now, certainly they could get to the bullpen, but if you get to the back end of Oakland's bullpen, it's actually really good. So there is that path to like Alex Wood just has a decent game, and by using him, you negatively correlate with the field. So I don't want that to come off as any sort of really like ringing Alex Wood endorsement or anything, because it's not, but there is that path to him as a low owned value play. Andrew Heaney getting 30% ownership, I think, is the guy that is certainly a lot easier to talk about. Showed up in 29% of the lineups that I built as well at 6,600. So his strikeout stuff so far this year is not what it has been in the past. He only has a 20.8% K percentage, 4.67 xFIP, 1.5 home runs per 9. It's concerning. I want to take a look also at sort of how his underlying stuff has been. 20.8% K percentage. You can see here that's down from previous seasons. His stuff plus this year is also really bad. 83 is well below average. 100 is about average. You can see his weighted average from 2021 to 2023 was 99.8. So I am really concerned about Heaney in the sense that not only is his strikeout percentage down, which we're far enough into the season for most pitchers that you can actually put some stock in that because it does stabilize relatively quickly, but his underlying stuff is bad. His velocity is down. There's legitimate reason to be concerned about Andrew Heaney's strikeout percentage. That being said, on a short slate at 6,600 in a park that limits power, he does still look good here. I just sort of think, like, even if you look at these two pitchers, is there that big of a talent difference between Andrew Heaney and Alex Wood? I'm not sure that the answer is yes, as far as it being like a 4-1 or 5-1 ownership gap. And then also, Oakland does strike out, but this team does have power. They can do damage. They're not this, cakewalk offense. They're not the Marlins. They're not the Rockies. So I do think that Heaney is a good play. Like I said, he's showing up in 29% of the lineups that I built for this show. But in individual tournament lineups, I do think you can make the case that pivoting from him to either Gibson or Manaea at a little bit more expensive price tag, or Wood at a cheaper price tag, is certainly very reasonable. From a stacking standpoint, I sort of already mentioned it, but Texas is showing up a lot. That shouldn't surprise anybody. They have one of the higher implied run totals on the slate. They have a ton of good hitters in their lineup. Alex Wood doesn't miss a lot of bats. The park does suck, both in terms of home runs and also just the massive foul territory takes the bats away from guys. But they do look good. I mentioned it a second ago. 2,300 Travis Jankowski is showing up a ton. You can kind of ignore that. Like, I don't think Travis Jankowski should actually be 18% owned. It's just sort of a value placeholder at this point in the day. I do think that Marcus Semien, Adolis Garcia, Corey Seager all should be popular. They are projected for like 7 to 15% ownership right now, which is around where they're showing up for me. They're all around 15% for me. Jonah Heim at catcher looks pretty good. Then you get some more value with Ezekiel Duran, with Leody Taveras. So I do think that Texas just offers a lot that you would want as far as stacks go. They're in a pretty good spot. They have really good hitters with plenty of upside, and they have some expensive bats, but they also do offer some value, which is nice. Oakland is a team that's really interesting to me from a stacking standpoint for all the reasons I was just saying about Andrew Heaney. Like when we talked about Minnesota and Seattle, I laid out the reasons that maybe you would go to Minnesota against a 40% owned Luis Castillo. It is a hell of a lot more appealing to me to get to Oakland against a 30% owned Heaney than to get to Minnesota against a 40% owned Castillo. You have a much weaker pitcher in Heaney. He does give up home runs, always has, even when he was striking guys out. And then you get an Oakland lineup that does have power. You have Brent Rooker. You have Langoliers. You might have Ruiz. I think he got hurt yesterday, so may or may not be in the lineup. Tyler Nevin has seemingly figured out how to hit. He had a really good spring with Baltimore, didn't make the club, so they lost him, and he's been tearing it up with Oakland. Maybe he regresses back to the 4A player that he's been in the past, but he was in the Baltimore organization. There is a real chance that they unlocked something with him and that he's going to be solid going forward. He's also still dirt cheap with MPE. I think Oakland looks like a really interesting, like just contrarian, negatively leveraged, whatever you want to call it, stack here against Andrew Heaney. I could definitely see this being a slate where I'm heavy on Heaney, and then in my non-Heaney lineups, there's just a lot of Oakland mixed in. So I would like it to work out that way, really. I don't know if it will, obviously, but I do think it's a good idea. I like that approach quite a bit. And then finally wrapping things up with the Miami Marlins, taking on the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. Good park for hitting. One of these teams can't hit, though. Walker Buehler is back for the Dodgers, which is good to see. Made 6 rehab starts in the minors. Didn't go more than 5 innings in any of those. Faced 21 hitters, was the most hitters that he faced, I believe. So I'm going to have a difficult time getting too much of him at 9,300 probably. He is right now projected for about 21% ownership. He showed up around 15% of the time for me. He does have a great matchup. Miami can't hit. They just traded Luis Arraez to the Padres, so their strikeout percentage basically has to go up by default as well. I think Buehler is fine. Like I would rather go to $9,300 Buehler than 9K Steele, just because he is the better strikeout pitcher and mostly because he has the matchup against Miami. But you do still get that risk of how deep into the game is he going to go and what exactly does he look like in his first major league start in a while. But Buehler looks fine here. He probably doesn't have that right tail as far as his fantasy point distributions go. He's likely to have a very good game. It's just unlikely for him to put up a score that you absolutely have to win. But on a short slate, not too concerned about that. If he just gets me 17, 18 DraftKings points, like if you tell me ahead of time he's going to get 17, 18 DraftKings points, I'm going to just play a good amount of Walker Buehler and move on and assume that nobody else really breaks the slate either, because they probably won't. Munoz on the other side has been really impressive through his first couple of major league starts. He's not likely to be that guy. $7,200 price tag, facing the Dodgers here, getting no ownership. I don't think he should get ownership. If you look at his FanGraphs page, doesn't project as anything special. 3 starts at AAA this year, 4 total appearances, 15 innings pitched. He struck out 11.7% of hitters. He walked 18%, 22% K percentage at AAA with the Braves last year, 22% at AAA with the Nats last year. It was 16 relief appearances for the Braves, mostly working as a starter for the Nats. Like, there's no real reason to think this guy is what he has been through his first couple major league starts. Projects for like a 19 to 20% K percentage in most projection systems. So, no, I don't think he is real. Maybe he's made some improvements and he's better than he's being projected for. I kind of doubt that is even the case, but even that is a big difference from what he's actually shown at the major league level so far. Long story short, I'm not looking to get to Munoz in this spot, and I'm definitely looking to get to the Dodgers bats. They look like the top team on the slate. They have what I think is a good matchup, at least. They're in a good park for hitting. They, from a 5-man stack standpoint, aren't showing up a lot right now. I think that probably changes just because, again, more value will open up somewhere. But in smaller stacks, they're showing up a lot, and I think they should be. The only problem with the Dodgers is that they are expensive. Ohtani and Betts both north of 6K on DraftKings. Rojas is cheap, not exactly the type of hitter that you're looking to get to a lot, but he does open some things up. Kike, if he's in the lineup, is cheap. Then you get right back to a really expensive Freeman. Smith north of 5K. Muncy's pretty expensive. So as far as 5-man stacking the Dodgers go, it can be tough because you're probably not really going to be able to do it and then also get to Castillo or Buehler or, Reagans, like these pitchers that look good. If you're 5-man stacking the Dodgers, that's probably where using some more Alex Wood or Kyle Gibson or Sean Manaea, Simeon Woods Richardson, that's probably where those guys come into play. And obviously, you're not going to be nearly as confident in going to them as you are in paying for Buehler and Castillo. So I think what people are going to do a lot is go to, say, Seattle, get to those really cheap bats that have power, and then round it out with Ohtani Betts as a 2-man or Ohtani Smith as a 2-man, whatever it might be. So I think you're going to see those builds a lot, and you will see plenty of ownership coming into these Dodgers, but I do think you'll see the full 5-man Dodger stacks a bit less. So the ownership here is a little bit misleading. I like the idea of getting to them as 5-mans. Maybe you go Dodgers and Athletics, or you go Athletics 5-man with 2 or 3 Dodgers instead of the Mariners 5-man, that I think people will use a lot. So that's a way that you can go where, one, you get some leverage on the field by stacking the Dodgers together when the field may not be doing that as much. And then you also get some negative correlation by using, say, Tyler Nevin and Shea Langoliers to offset the Dodgers salaries. So I think that, there are ways you can make the Dodgers work. They're not going to be the ways that feel the best or look the best, but I do think that they just look like, obviously, a very good team to get to. And there are ways that you can do it that are going to be somewhat contrarian. On the other side, the Marlins, I don't really know what to say about them. Jazz Chisholm always is fine. He's 5,300. I don't mind that, but clearly it's not a good matchup if Buehler is anywhere close to what Buehler normally is. So paying that price tag at a loaded outfield position isn't super appealing to me. And then beyond that, I don't really know where you go. As far as stacking against popular pitchers, like I'd still just rather be going to Oakland. I'd probably rather go to Minnesota than Miami. They just have more talent. So I have a hard time really making any sort of case for Miami outside of like Jazz Chisholm is good. So to recap from a pitching standpoint, it looks like at the top end, we have some pretty solid arms in good matchups. Luis Castillo leading the way for me right now. Good strikeout matchup or decent strikeout matchup against Minnesota. Good strikeout pitcher. Cole Reagans, if the weather cooperates, if they do move the lock time up for this slate, then he looks pretty good here. Buehler is fine, but is likely to be somewhat limited after not going more than 5 innings in any of his minor league outings. From a value standpoint, Andrew Heaney is projected to get pretty much all of that ownership. I think it's warranted just because he can get strikeouts, at least earlier in his career, could get strikeouts. Don't know if he still can, but he is in a good park for pitching. But I do think he's getting more ownership than warranted compared to some other value guys like Woods Richardson, Gibson, Manaea. Like, I don't have confidence in those guys, but I don't have confidence in Heaney either. So I think that's something to, keep an eye on. Stacking, we see Texas and the Dodgers up at the top. As far as all stacks go, the Dodgers do fall off a bit in 5-mans because they're so expensive. Seattle likely to be very popular as well. Mets look fine. Those look like, the top 4 stacks, and then everything kind of drops off. And then individually for hitters at the top, we have Ohtani, Betts, not surprising. You can ignore this Jankowski piece. That kind of just can be any value hitter once lineups come out. Semien, Garcia, Seager. So definitely some stud hitting in good spots here at the top. And that's another reason why I kind of think some of those value pitchers are going a little bit underrepresented, is that instead of what everyone's going to do, taking 1 or 2 of these top bats and then using value bats elsewhere and expensive pitching, you can roll the dice on some cheap pitching, hope that they score relatively close to the expensive pitching, and then actually be getting, these guys together, whether it's, Ohtani and Betts together from the Dodgers or Semien, Garcia, Seager all together from the Rangers. I think that's one way that you can build your lineups a little bit differently on the slate than the field probably will. So that's all I have for this video. Thanks a lot for checking it out. I'll be doing it noon, Monday through Friday, just doing the same thing. So thanks for checking it out. And if you are subscribed to my Dub Club, I will talk to you in Discord later. Thanks a lot, guys.